Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program, we're going to reach back into a little bit of American history that certainly had a strong influence on today, and that is that of the 1960s and the rock revolution. On the program today, we're going to be talking with author of the book High Notes. It's a rock memoir. This is going to be a fascinating story, as you'll discover he started at an agency for the performing arts in New York City and did some promotions for some of the centenary of rock and roll of the United States from 1966 through 1969. He signed and worked with such notable groups as Jefferson Airplane, The Doors, Chambers Brothers, Iron Butterfly, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Steppenwolf, and many more. Great story, a rock memoir to find out who these people were, what it was like to work with them, and to be in such a crazy business like rock and roll management. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program our guest, Richard Lauren. Richard, how are you doing today?
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show, Dan.
It's such an interesting thing to reach back into this part of time in America and to realize just what a change was really occurring from that nuclear family of the 1950s and the status quo of having things just be safe and manicure the yard to things really being shaken up and having someone like you on the program who was in the middle of this storm, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that was an amazing period of time. I mean, even from the artistic, cultural point of view alone, you know, there was so many great artists just bursting out from all walks of the music, of the cultural world, whether it be art, film, music for sure. And, you know, in those days, music was really, I think, more like a movement, a catalyst for change. You know, in those days, there was a lot going on. We had the anti-war movement, and women were liberated and became liberated, and, you know, we had the civil rights movement. And so it was the experience, you know, being there. I mean, with the music was one thing, but just being part of that world was amazing because we had a lot of hope for change and for a better future, and you know, some of it came to pass. I think that women are a lot better off, and I think the black population is a little bit better off. I think we made some inroads, but anyway, it was an amazing period.
Now, what made you decide to go in that direction with your life as far as getting in and managing musical acts?
Well, actually, it came kind of like a fluke. I was a science major in college, and I went to a concert once in my sophomore year, and I saw this performer, this girl on stage, and she was so illuminating and exciting, and I just wanted to date her. So I said...
Nothing like motivation, right?
Right, hey. I'm sure I'm not the only one that was motivated in that way. But anyway, so I said, well, how am I going to meet this girl? You know, so I said, I know what I'll do. I'll join the drama department. So I joined the drama department to meet her, and I met her and we dated, but more than that, I became really immersed in, I mean, I really enjoyed the people. I liked the camaraderie of working together for a production. I did some stage managing, some directing, a little bit of an acting, and so on. And I stayed with it for a couple of years. I switched my major from English to drama, and I realized that I really enjoyed being in surrounded by artists, in the company of artists. I had a strong affinity for that. And what happened, I met another a kid at the school as well. He was a year older than me, and he was working in it with the theater in Baltimore, and he was a manager of the theater, and he was a year older, as I said. And he left after that year, and then he asked me, well, first I was his assistant, and then he asked me if I wanted to run it. He would put a good word in for me with his bosses and so on. Next thing you know, I was managing a tent theater in Baltimore, and Liberace came in as the final week, and he did his performance that week, and he had a lot of demands on management, not unreasonable demands, but, you know, things that artists need, and his entourage and so on. And he played very late, and he signed autographs, and he felt that he wanted to have a dinner afterwards, after the show. It was like 1 o'clock, and what are you going to do to provide a dinner for Liberace? So I went to a fine restaurant locally not too far away, and I made an arrangement with the owner to do a dinner for him, and so on and so forth. And I took care of a lot of the problems that came our way during that week. And when his agent and manager came to town at the end of the week on Sunday, he told him, he said, you know, you should really interview this kid. I think he'd be good in the business, rada, rada, rada. So I went up to New York. I was from New York, and I had a little interview, kind of. But the next thing you know, I was sitting behind a desk, and with a secretary, and I was a full-fledged agent with very little experience. As a matter of fact, none. They'd asked me if I was interested in being an agent. I said, I don't know. I'm really more into the theater, but I'll give it a shot. So it was nice. I had a nice job, a nice office, a little salary, nothing exorbitant. But then I realized that this Agency for the Performing Arts, was a personal appearance agency that represented like more middle-of-the-road artists. And here we are, like 1966, and the youth is screaming for like rock and roll. And I was given the colleges from like Maine to Florida, and I had no talent to book. I mean, I hardly could book Anita Bryant and John Davidson and Roger Williams and Liberace and Harry Belafonte into these schools. They weren't really interested in that. So I basically had to go down to the village and just start hanging out at clubs until one day I was tipped off that the Jefferson Airplane were going to be coming to town, and I parked myself down at the Cafe A Go-Go for a week, and got to know their manager, Bill Graham, at the time, and got befriended some of the musicians, especially Marty Ballin, and one thing led to another. At the end of the week, I took their manager, Bill, up to meet my boss, and they got on really well, and next thing you know, I'm booking the Jefferson Airplane.
Mm-hmm. I find it funny because you actually open up the book talking about how you and Liberace began to sort of work together for a brief period of time. And there was a character in there when you started talking about this person. I realized when we're in this kind of business we're in, you run into these kind of people. So just briefly, let's talk about Blossom Horowitz.
Well,
because, I deal with that kind of nonsense through PR people all the time, that self-importance. You described it so well, I'm like, I just would rather talk almost most of the show about those kind of people.
Well, there are people that I don't know. They really feel that they have a right here's a woman that she was a group sales director, and she was like in her 50s and made up to the hilt, and she was determined to take the center stage, in the court of the Sun Queen, I call him, And she was a piece of work in her fine clothes and nouveau riche finery and stuff, and I was there and I met Lieber. I was waiting for him to show up. He finally shows up, and I didn't know what I was going to call him. Should I call him Lee, Mr. Liberace, and I was kind of like, I was taken with celebrity like everybody's taken with celebrity, and I started to talk with him. He was really friendly, and all of a sudden this woman comes in and she like pushes me aside, and she says, Lee, you're just so fabulous, she says,
Right.
And she was gushing to the end. She said, I've been waiting to meet you for years, she said, I sold out all your shows. As if he had nothing to do with selling out his own shows.
Not Liberace. He wouldn't have
Liberace. It was all about her,
Elvis Presley, yeah.
So then she says to him, don't be, if you have any problems, Lee, by the way, she called him Lee, she said, you come and talk to me. Forget about these young managers, So these are the kind of people that, you run across, and you kind of take them with a grain of salt, just like Liberace did, He said, you got to... These are the kind of people, you can't expect everyone to be like you or to be working with you. I mean, I have a lot of those situations with managers that I had to deal with.
I thought it was funny because you sort of had your own form of retribution, if you will, even subtle, being in the limousine as she knocked on the door and you just cracked the window. Sorry, there's no room left.
Sorry, all sold out, Blossom.
Now, when it came to really working with groups, it seemed to me that, with Jefferson Airplane and the Doors, these were people that were really leading the forefront in many ways with the style of music they had. As you were describing, Jim Morrison would get up on stage and he could take you from laughter to anger, to all these places in between, but sometimes he didn't even know what the outcomes were going to be like. But that's how these people were. Even Grace Slick with her banter on stage, the things these people were doing. I remember when I went to my first Van Halen concert, I think it was in 1980, and I heard David Lee Roth screaming out the F word. I thought, is he going to get arrested for this? But this was really commonplace on these stages, especially during that time.
The thing about Jim, first of all, he was a poet, number one, and there, we have a lot of great songwriters that perform and write songs with bands, but Jim was one of those few. You have your Leonard Cohens, you have your Jim Morrisons, you have your Bob Dylan, you have your Patti Smith, but generally they're rare, and Jim had an amazing backup band, I wouldn't even call them, that was almost demeaning to call them a backup band, but they were so great, they were so strong and impeccably arranged their music, and it kind of just underscored that poetry that Jim had and that his choreography, and those guys were like telepathically connected to me. Not to me, but to each other, I saw in them, and to see them, and they were really unique. Robbie Krieger, most guitar players from that era are blues based. They study the blues, and they put their particular feeling to it, whether it be Eric Clapton or any of these guitar players. But Robbie Krieger was flamenco based. He learned to play the guitar, and he learned flamenco. So his playing was unique, and it wasn't based on anything but that. And Ray was an incredible piano player, we know, and it seems as if, well, the thing about Jim also is that with him you could see more than any other musician. You could see the muse as how it worked through an artist. It's like the power of that muse and how it just it flowed through him to make itself known. Whatever the circumstances, and unlike, for instance, Mick Jagger, and I love the Stones and I love Mick Jagger, but Mick Jagger, he was like not a copy of James Brown, but he got it from James Brown. He put his own thing to it for sure, but his moves were studied and so on. With Jim, in every show I saw him in, he was never the same. His moves, he had a style, of course, but, you'd never know which way he was going to move. And the instrumentation behind it, too, He'd move a certain way, and the guy'd hit the snare drum, John, and Robbie would make a sound with the guitar, not even a note, just, and it was a stage, it was just a unique experience to be with the Doors and to watch them perform. Anybody who was around in those days that got a chance to really see him, he was really, to me, he was a shaman for his generation. Mm-hmm. He broke us through to the other side, so to speak.
Yeah, and although I'd never actually seen the Doors live outside of a DVD, you could see exactly what you're talking about that muse. It's sort of, he took the energy, I would believe, that was happening spontaneously and allowed it to work through him. Would that be a good way to describe that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. You that's exactly
much
what I was
like watching Jimi Hendrix play guitar. He seemed to be that way too. Like, Jimmy's gone, but he's in an area that he's receiving the energy, and it's coming out through his guitar.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and Jerry was that way too. It's like a connection to. It's like letting yourself go and let the muse take over in a way.
Right.
And I think like Jerry's playing was a lot like that too. There was this kid that actually inspired me to write this book. He was a sophomore at Bates College, and and then I was involved with him for a while, and we can maybe talk about that later. But the point is that I asked him once. I said, and he was a kid. He never saw the Grateful Dead play. He never went to concerts and saw Jerry. I said to him, I said, how did he become interested in the Grateful Dead? He was so young when Jerry died, and the Dead stopped playing. He said to me, and he says, when I was first heard Jerry play on this bootleg album in 1987 of the Dead doing All Along the Watchtower, he says, it was like unlike anything I heard before. He said, it was the freedom, the open-endedness in his playing. He said it changed how I listened to music. He said after that I wanted to figure out how to play music with that kind of in the moment energy. And he said, I think for the first time I understood what it meant to be a real musician, and he was a musician, in fact. But it was an interesting take on. You get great guitar players, and they do great licks. Studio musicians, they never make a mistake or something, but it's not the same. They don't have that same thing that like a Morrison or Jerry had.
And I think about that today, especially as you look at music today, and you kind of wonder, has that been lost with so much covered commercialism? It does happen. It sprouts, but then it almost burns out like an ember as fast as it came, where here it stayed solid for a good few years before it sort of disappeared.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was well put. But, I think what we had in our favor at that time is that music went from AM to FM, and right away album cuts were being played, and that became the music vehicle of the counterculture. I mean, we despised AM radio. Well, nobody listens to AM radio. I mean, they only play the hits, and we don't listen to the hits. We like the album cuts, and that's basically what it was. So a lot of these musicians had a chance to have their music aired. Where today, if you're not, there's such a small window. I mean, obviously, we all know that the corporatization of so many facets of the music industry today. It's kind of like they find someone who's got some talent, and then they mold them to almost fit a cast, that fits the medium. And I think that we lose a lot of spontaneity. We lose a lot of what I think we want out of music.
I know you mentioned something too that was real critical, and I can't imagine the time, but I'm going to guess the year when it began to fade was about 1987. And you were talking about how they used to play albums on the FM side, and I remember. And it was funny because you got an interesting short story in there about Pete Townsend looking on Jim Morrison trying to figure out what the hell is this guy doing. But what was fascinating, getting back to the album part, is that when Pete Townsend broke out on his own to produce a couple of albums on his own, which I love some of his solo stuff, but one was White City.
Right.
And I remember that they would play, at least 4 or 5 tracks from this album to the point where you realized, that one song was pretty good, almost made me want to buy the album, but now after listening to this, I really want to go listen to the whole album.
Right,
and you just don't see that anymore. It just seems to have disappeared.
Well, it's all just a quick hit, I mean, our attention spans have become reduced so much, Most of us are in a text trance, and it's like, you look at TV today. I mean, even if you just, TV has always been this way. But if you look at TV, like 70s, even in the 80s, and you look at it today, it's like so much slower. Then everything is bang, 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 bang.
Right.
And the Madison Avenue's gotten so much better at what they do. I mean, better or worse, whatever you want to put it. But
as Bill Hicks said, anybody in here in advertising and marketing, go kill yourselves.
Right. Yeah, and believe me, he's one of my favorites too. Bill is, boy.
Now, it's funny because I, for some reason, as I was starting to pick up this book and beginning to read it, I started having this vision of that scene in the movie Pink Floyd, The Wall. And it was that scene where you see them all partying in the back after the concert, and the manager, I guess he's the manager, he's biting into the pineapple and spitting it out, and just all this waste. And I think a lot of people think that is what rock management and sort of that whole scene is like. What was it really like?
You mean
for you anyway?
Well, yeah, as I say, I can only speak for myself, and basically, I only managed 2 entities. One was Jerry Garcia. And then but during him, a short way into my managing his personal affairs outside the Grateful Dead, then the Grateful Dead asked me to manage them. So I never really managed anyone else, but I worked with a lot of managers.
Right.
And if I can for a moment explain the difference between like an agent and a manager and a promoter, there are 3 different. This is what brings the music to the stage. Okay, there's the promoter. He raises the money. He meets the demands of the writer, of the artist, and he finds the hall, and he meets with the hall, and comes up with the money. Then the agent looks at it and says, "Okay, this is a good idea. I think this promoter's reliable, and he's got the hall. I've got the papers, and he's come up with the money. Okay, I'll present it." Then you present that offer to the manager. Now, the manager. Good managers have very few artists. I mean, it's not like, I'm sure there are management companies, but I think the best managers are the ones that have like 1 or 2 clients. Like, Jeff Rosen just manages Bob Dylan, Colonel Parker just managed Elvis, and so on. So you have to really have, your plate can't be too full of artists when you're a manager, because you have to deal with the immediate needs of each and every member of that band or that solo artist, whatever it is, you know. So, okay, the manager is presented with this offer from the agent, and he decides, okay, well, we want more money. So he goes to the agent, we want more money. He goes to the promoter says, well, I can't give you any more. Okay, so the manager basically has to approve the venue, the situation, and so on. And the agent puts together the tour. So he doesn't have a lot of, although I did like probably more than others because I traveled a lot while the band was on the road. So I got to know them as well. Maybe not as much as I did like when I was with the Grateful Dead because I was their personal manager. But I got to know Jim. I got to know the band members. I got to know the airplane and so on. But generally, agents don't get that close. They come in, they get the money. You know, they barely, you know, because in this world, the business world, there's so much avarice, so much. I don't know. I ultimately got out of it because I couldn't take it anymore. But I mean,
you have to be insane to be in it.
Well, yeah, but also I didn't like the way that my superiors and the people that I was working with in the business world treated artists like commodities. You know,
right.
They could have just as well been selling fruit, you know, or whatever, or cars. You know, it's not about what I mean. Like I'd go on the road, I'd come back, I'd go through hell. Like Jim Morrison, I'd have a really rough weekend. It was exhilarating for sure, but it was taxing on me. You know, I came back, I give the receipts to the boss. He said, "How much money do we make? What do we wind up? What's our commission?" You know, he never said, "Well, gee, how was the tour? How did you do? How's Jim?" You know, I don't even care about that. You know, so I kind of, you know, I don't know. I digress. I'm digressing here a little bit, Dan, but yeah. How was it to be a manager? Okay, you're dealing with a lot of different personalities. I mean, with Jerry. I mean, we were really kind of like locked in right away. I mean, we had an affinity for each other. We had the same. I mean, the only thing we didn't share was music. I wasn't really a musician, so. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, we were very close friends, and you know, we had a very good relationship. And it was like not like really having to manage. It's like he co-managed himself, you know. But with the band members of the Grateful Dead, when I'm with the Grateful Dead, there are many musicians, and they all have different needs, you know. And as a manager, you have to also make sure that the cash flow is working for the management company, for instance, in this case, Grateful Dead Productions. You know, you have to make sure that enough money's coming in from whatever the income base, the source is, whether it be on the road or records and so on. And the Dead they made all their money on the road, but they spent a lot of money to make that money on the road, you know. So ultimately they come back for a tour and, you know, you take the money in, okay, you make the payroll, you pay the rent, and, you know, but then, you know, somebody wants something else. Somebody wants a little more. One musician wants a studio, the other one wants a car, the other one wants got to pay alimony, you know. So it's like, oh my God, you know, if there's not enough money there, you gotta keep everybody happy, and it's kind of difficult because everybody has demand on the purse, so to speak.
I know you were, as I learned about Steppenwolf, you know, and I know that John Kay was somebody who could be really hard line when it came to the business side. Yeah.
I didn't, you know, I booked a few gigs with him. I traveled with him a little, but I didn't have like the connection with them like I had with the members. You know, I was more like basically like I described an agent before. You know, you get the money. And then that's it. You know, also Mick Jagger is a great businessman too, from what I understand. You know, I mean. Yeah, I
was remembering reading about John Kay and Steppenwolf, and it came to a point, of course, he broke from the band and decided to do his own thing, and so the members didn't know what to do. So they thought it would be kosher to go ahead and continue touring, formerly of Steppenwolf. John Kay didn't like that too much, and as I understand, he made a deal with them and said, I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and let you continue to say that if you sign over all of your rights to the music that we created. And these guys were all too willing in that state to do that and didn't realize, hey, the baby boomers are about to turn those cassette tapes and albums into CDs and the millions they lost, and you realize you've got to almost be nuts to be in this business.
Well, also, the thing few people realize, you know, is that I have an artist that's a personal friend of mine that, you know, I won't mention her name because that doesn't really matter. But I asked her, she plays a lot of gigs. I said, why do you just keep playing? She was like 60-something, almost 70 years old. She's a great performer, you know. I said to her, Maria, how come you just keep playing? Why don't you just chill? She says, I have to. She says, that's the only way I can make money. She said, I never wrote any songs.
Oh.
And if you don't write music, when you stop being on stage, it's over.
Right.
You know, I mean, I look at what's happened to the Chambers Brothers. I mean, they wrote a few songs, but, you know, those guys Lester's trying to make it on $1,200 a month.
Yeah.
You know, on his Social Security and stuff, and he made some of the greatest contributions to that kind of music. I mean, it's sad, but that's the way the artists are treated. You're hot today and you're cold tomorrow, and if you're not a songwriter, you know, forget it.
I know the Chambers Brothers, that was a quick little interesting bit there when you talked about this guy they came across. You don't know where they found him, but as you described him, I'm thinking, you know, I've met people like that before.
Right. Right. He's like the flip side of that Blossom woman, you know. It's like this guy came in, you know, he smelled it, he saw that they were about to make it. The record came out, and he just worked his way in there and ingratiated himself with the brothers and, you know, made them feel that they were being taken advantage. I mean, I've worked really hard for these guys because I really love the Chambers Brothers. I love their music, and I love them as people. And when I saw this guy come in, it's like, you know, Lester Chambers was the Chambers brother that I worked with most closely, and, you know, he was almost embarrassed that, you know, that they had this manager, but somehow or another he locked hold of them, and, you know, I just couldn't deal with it any longer.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have to ask, because I was really surprised to read this in the book, but as you were talking about Bobby Darin, did he really witness the assassination of Robert Kennedy?
That's what he did, yeah. He was traveling.
That surprised me.
No, he was traveling. He was traveling with Robert Kennedy.
Okay.
During his campaign that he won when he got shot that June. And he was traveling with him on the campaign. I think he took some time off from performing. And he was there when he took the bullet. So he told me, and actually, I didn't know that to be true. But then I did some research before I actually wrote that, and I found that he was in fact traveling with him. You know, and you could see from my piece in the book, the chapter, that the effect that this had on Bobby Darin, and he immediately became a songwriter because he wanted to protest against, you know, what was happening in the world, the injustice and whatnot. And I mean, like I said, he wasn't a Bob Dylan, but he wrote a really few very interesting songs in an album that probably no one ever knows about. It's called Robert Walden Casoto, you know. He took his toupee off, and he went back to his old name, and, you know, and wanted to do his own thing, but...
You know, the things that you had to do, what you find yourself probably doing some things and looking back on it now thinking, you know, what was I thinking when I did that? Such as that ghost ship trip that you found yourself on.
Well, you know, I was young, you know, and I liked getting high. You know, I got turned on to marijuana, and I enjoyed it. I mean, to me, basically, it was all about music. I mean, music really shaped my life and spoke to my soul, and, you know, it broadened my life and expanded my consciousness. And I liked getting high and listening to music. It only heightened the effect of great music. You know, so, you know, I continued it. But anyway, you know the story. I just wanted to. I had taken a year off. An interlude from the music business. I didn't know if I was going to go back or not, but I was, you know, disenchanted with the music business, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. But I said, I'm getting out of here. So I left the village, and I went to Italy and stayed there, and I traveled around, and I met this guy who was an Egyptian, you know, he was a retired in the Army, at least that's what he told me, and, you know, I shared a joint with him, and he said, this is not the real thing, he says to me.
Oh, boy.
Said, the real thing is this oil from Lebanon, you know? So I said, oh, man, I got nothing to do, man. I'll go to Lebanon, I'll get some of this oil, I'll empty the fruit cans, and I'll inject the oil into here, and I'll be a camper, and I'll make believe and I'll come back, and, you know, and I'll strike it rich, you know, sell this oil, you know, young fool that I was, you know, and you know, I was protected by the universe in a way. I had the right people intervene and say, hey, you don't want to do that, boy, you know. But you know, life is full of experiences, you know. Yeah, you work your way through them, and sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not.
You know, when you look back on this time in your life, what would you say is the thing that stands out the most that you think, you know, it wouldn't be bad to just experience that one more time?
Been there, done that. I'm sorry, Dan. Been there, done that. You know, it's hard for me. I mean, I'm 72 years old today, by the way.
Congratulations. Happy birthday.
And thank you. And, you know, it's like when you've done that in that era, it's like somebody said, would you want to manage today? I said, no way would I want to manage today, you know? And no way, you know, you can only, when you're young, you know, you do things with a young spirit, you know? I mean, I still have a young spirit in me, but, you know, when you've done something, it's not like you really want to do it over and over again, at least not for me, you know? When something didn't bring me joy, I left it right away because, you know, I trusted in the universe to make something happen for me, you know? And the 3 or 4 times in my life when I just said, no, I'm stopping, I'm not going there anymore, I'm out of here. The universe treated me well, and one of the things about my book that I visit all the time and going back and trying to look over my past, you know, and it was became like a spiritual pilgrimage to look back on my life, and I started to question why things happen, you know? You figure, what is it that happens? Is it a choice you make? Is it a lucky accident? Is it, you know, the stars? Is it the genes? You know, is it, you know, you don't know. And, you know, to me, looking back was very rewarding because it was a very self-evaluative look at myself, you know, and I started saying, well, why are we here? What are we here for? You know, who knows? I mean, we'll never know the answers to where do we come from, why are we here, where are we going? You know, no one will ever answer that question until they're dead and maybe never then, you know. But you wonder what it is if you had done things a different way, how different it would be, you know. It's just a major puzzle, you know, and I kind of think as if I trusted my intuition, and I felt that rewarded me really by trusting your intuition, because if you don't, I think you breed stress by doing things that you really don't want to do. I mean, look, I was lucky. I could not do things that I didn't want to do, but to the extent that you're able to do what you don't want to, not do what you don't want to do, I think you should go there. Well, that's only was my particular thing. I'm not.
Well, I love that you're actually presenting this to our listeners the way that you are. You know, we talk a lot about that. People are trying to reboot themselves by midlife because they've spent the first 30, 40, 50 years doing what they thought they were supposed to do because of what everybody else was telling them this is the way to go. And today, you know, like you were saying about Madison Avenue, it's even worse. You know, you got advertising on the side of people's cars, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Everybody telling you what you should be doing, what the right way to approach life is, especially here in America. And you realize that it just doesn't work like that, that like you, what you need to do is dig in and realize, use your intuition, you know, follow that, and then just see what happens.
You know, you got to follow your bliss, you know. I mean, Joseph Campbell said, you know, and I believe that. I mean, because that's where the rewards really come, you know. And yeah, I mean, the thing is, people today are afraid. We live in a population of people that are worried. They're afraid of their jobs. They're afraid of their health. They're afraid of everything, you know. They're made to be afraid of terrorists. You know, I mean, and some of it's founded, but you know, I think when people are in a fear mode, they continue to do what they necessarily don't. They don't want to take a chance, see? And it's difficult for people in these times, you know? It is, and it's hard to get the rewards that you'd like to get as a human, you know? You know, I sometimes feel as if, you know, we're treated as consumer units by, you know, not only Madison Avenue, but by the government, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
I think it's fascinating for the listeners, you know, to take a look at this book, High Notes, because it reminds us that during that time with, you know, the Doors and the Stones and the Who and Jefferson Airplane and on, is that these people stood up. It was really where music and politics were the same thing in many ways. Even Robert Kennedy, as you mentioned in the book, seen it that way. He loved the counterculture movement because it was a time people were saying, we will rise, we will speak our truth in our heart, and we will accept the consequences of that. And they never were as bad as people would think they were.
Right, exactly. Exactly. You hit it right on the head, you know. It's it's the way, you know, like the thing that's different about Jerry in a way is that, and the Grateful Dead too, is that they never really, at least especially Jerry, never sought limelight. You know, he was never looking for I don't know, to be a star. He didn't want to be that.
He was the kind of guy that just wanted to play.
That's it. He was driven solely by his desire to become to grow as a musician. He said, "Look, I don't want to lead a band. I want to just be in one or another or two." And as we saw in his life, he played in several bands. He started as a banjo player, then he got to the guitar, and then an electric guitar, and then he got to pedal steel guitar. And he'd show up at a show 2 hours before the show began, or more sometimes, 3 hours, and just sit backstage, smoke Camel cigarettes, and a joint after another, and just sit there and play and warm up and try, and he did that, and that's what he loved to do. And he would rather perform too than study. He said, I mean, I practiced, but he said, I like to perform. Like that group Old and in the Way that was formed. I don't know if many people know about that, but it was a short-lived bluegrass band with David Grisman and Peter Rowan and Jerry Garcia and Vassar Clemens and so on. And it was a group where Jerry got to play banjo. Mm-hmm. And it was, I mean, when I saw Jerry perform in that band and in a lot of his own bands, the Jerry Garcia band, of playing with Merle Saunders, I mean, he was a light. He was so happy, He was really enjoyed playing that kind of. I mean, not that he wasn't happy with the Grateful Dead. Don't get me wrong, but you just can see how the music rewarded him, and how you could see why he didn't want to have anything to do with the business. I mean, the business end. I mean, anything other than really the music part. That was his thing.
Now, Richard, is there a website people can find out more about all of this?
Yes, absolutely. It's www.highnotes.org. That's my website. You can find out more about the artists I work with, a little bit more about me. There's some reviews and just basically a website that I'm proud of. People that have put that together for me with my help and so on. And I think it tells a lot about the book is about. There's a sample chapter in there and so on. Get a little bit, know a little bit. I'm also on Facebook too, and the book is basically about basically just like a coming of age book for me.
Right.
I didn't want to write a book about. I mean, I didn't want a book to be a pay-in to Jerry Garcia or to any of the other members that I worked with, but just to show how I gained my rites of passage through good fortune in the music world of the 60s and 70s with kids my age, They just happened to be really cool people, as human beings, I just loved being around with them and watched them create, and it just changed my life because I encountered through them a lot of different people, like I met the Kennedys through the Jefferson Airplane. I met Jane Fonda, Gilda Radner, the whole crew at Saturday Night Live, through the Grateful Dead with Jerry, and we were working together on a movie. I got to meet Bill Murray, hang with him a little bit, and you get to touch down and feel that these are really real people, They're true to themselves in many ways.
I think what's really fascinating too, Richard, is that, understanding exactly what you're saying when people find out what I do, and you watch them ooh and ah as they watch the big screen or they hear the radio interview or see the concert, and they think that these people are bigger than life, and they are for a moment. But when you get to the other side of the mirror, such as like what I do and what you have done, you realize exactly what you've said is, these are just regular people. They have a high-profile job. It takes a lot of creativity and imagination to do what they do, but most importantly, it takes the courage just to do it.
Really?
And that's the key that you talk about here in the book, is get your butt out there and just do it. You just don't know where it's going to put you.
I mean, they're like people. They put their pants on one leg at a time, I mean, they only can wear one suit of clothes, It's like they can be just as miserable as anybody, I mean, people think the answer is in how much money they make,
No,
I mean,
that.
Once you've made enough to pay the rent and get enough food and clothe your kids, feed them, after that, the people that are making $500 million a year or making $50,000 a year, they've done studies to show, hey, there is no difference, they're not any happier than you are, So, anyhow, my trip was really an amazing one. It was like a long and winding road on a long, strange, exhilarating trip.
Well, the fact is, too, is I've been enjoying this trip that I've been on over the last 10 to 15 years and talking with people you never would have thought you would be able to sit in front of and talk with, or even by phone, such as yourself. You know, people who were in the... Michael Lang was another one that came along.
Yeah.
You know, just before the movie about, what was it, Journey to Woodstock. I can't remember what it was. I'm actually talking with Michael Lang. You know,
yeah.
You find yourself like you were, you know, still starstruck, but then you realize, I get to sit and enjoy this person one-on-one for an hour. Another example was Graham Nash. Having him come in studio with his guitar, I brought my son in, and he sat right next to him as we did the interview, and I said, go ahead and play a song for us, you know, to have those kind of opportunities. So when you're following your heart, it's just amazing where it takes you, and you look back and think, you know, there is no way you could have ever planned a lot of those kind of things.
No way. You know, you just have to, you know, it's all, to me, it's energy, vibration. It's, you know, it sounds new age, but basically you just trust the universe, you know.
Right.
Visualize where you want to go, and if you're miserable, don't stay miserable. Try to find a way to really make yourself happy, you know. And that's, I don't know, that was the key for me, and the key to a lot of people that I know. Once they made the jump, they say, wow, why did I wait so long? You know?
It's easier than I thought it was.
Right. No kidding.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the program today. It was a true pleasure, and I know people will really enjoy the way this is put together because, you know, you don't get caught up in the glamour that you think you're going to get caught up in reading this book, but certainly that element is there. But more importantly, it's exactly what you said. You know, get out there and do what you were meant here to do. You just don't know what that's going to bring you.
Yeah. Well, believe me, it's been a great pleasure talking with you. It's really nice to talk to educated interviewers, people who understand, have read your book, and you can really open up, and that's what I've been able to do today, and I really want to thank you a lot for that, Daniel.
And I'm sure Grace Slick and Marty Ballin were thanking you as you did a little, well, let them read that in the book.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again, Dan. Have a good rest of the weekend.
You bet. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. Again, the book is High Notes, and our guest today, Richard Loren. You can find out more as we post that up on our website at Beyond50Radio.com. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.